Good afternoon and thank you for tuning in to the EastSide Community Radio, a bilingual radio program out of the EastSide Cafe in El Sereno that fills the void on discussions and documentation of local and global issues and events that directly affect our neighborhoods and communities. Today, we will be discussing Guerrero, Mexico, the rise of community self-defense police, and the case of political prisoner Nestora Salgado. Our first interview by Roberto Flores is with Antonio Arias, a lifelong organic left intellectual hailing from San Bernardino, that will cover the general social political situation in Mexico, particularly Guerrero, to lay the context for our second interview, which is the case of community police leader Nestora Salgado and of her defense.
Hello, Antonio. How are you?
Good morning. Buenos días. ¿Cómo estás?
All right, good. And before we get into the subject of Mexico, I just want to ask Antonio what university he graduated from.
None. I didn't finish my 8 years of official education, but I tried to read and be informed as much as possible.
Antonio is, to me, what Gramsci called an organic intellectual. Like many thousands that we have in our communities that come from the people's struggle, and reflect and analyze what is happening to us. And so we don't need a formal education, in certain respects is overstated. And Antonio is proof of that, and proof that we ourselves can understand what is going on in Mexico.
So I've been thinking how to present this thing, and I think we need some background on how we got here to the situation of the integration of the government to the crime and the creation of crime. And you can see that since the beginning, and even not near Mexico, the system itself is destructive. One of the problem of the heroin on Mexico became, when the British lost China. They got the population involved on the consumption of opium. And when Mao Zedong took over, many of those Chinese just migrate everywhere they could. Many of them, they end up on the state of Sinaloa. Since they already have the habit of consuming opium, they start planting amapola for their own personal use. And that's how the heroin was introduced in Mexico.
Now, I've been exposed to a lot of theories in terms of some of the factors that are involved in the development of what is now a narco state and a narco economy. But I have never heard that some of the roots of this goes back to the 1945-48 revolution in China, where Mao Zedong takes over, and many of the dealers of heroin, which were huge dealers, it makes sense, were dispersed throughout the world, and many of them came to Sinaloa, Mexico.
They were not dealers. They were common people with the habit. They came, principally on Mexico to two places, one on Mexicali and another one on Sinaloa. The ones on Mexicali, they part of the building of the railroads on United States. Chinese migrants and all that work on it and end up migrating, many of them to Mexicali, and some of them then came direct from China to Mexicali, and another ones they end up on Sinaloa. And from that habit, by planting, for personal use, then you start the build-up of the cartels of Sinaloa. The other thing, when Somoza fall down on Nicaragua, the Reagan administration was cut out for funds in order to support economically the war against the Sandinistas and found the Contras. They facilitate the making of cocaine and field labs. The coca plant was used on the Andes for the altitude, to walk on highlands and all that, but it's very minimum and is commonly used by the indigenous on that area. And the cocaine at that point was made mainly in labs and under extreme control and very expensive. When United States needed to fund the Contras, then they teach the field processing of the cocaine, and then we have the problem of Colombia.
So you're talking now the late 80s, early 90s.
Yes, when the Contras.
Reagan was in power, and you had the struggle against the Sandinistas that had just won the revolution, and Reagan needed a counter, but he could not receive help from Congress. So he decided
the CIA started, teaching the making of cocaine on field labs.
Field laboratories.
Yes. After that, you teach these people to do that, it's impossible to get it back. At that point, the Colombian cartels fought against the government and slowly got ousted from the Caribbean and used Central America, used Mexico, and then Mexico again. And the cartels of Mexico became strong enough to start financing its own buying of cocaine and its own buying of products, controlled products from the ground. And you see the situation now.
You're saying that one of the factors involved in the utilization of drugs by not just Mexico, but the U.S. even, and impacting on Mexico was the flooding of crack cocaine in South Central. That the
cocaine itself, crack came later.
Cocaine first to fund the Contras, and then not care. Freeway Ricky Ross, that's been a guest in Margaret Prescott's Sojourner Truth show. You know, he was a main player in selling millions and millions and millions of dollars. His main supply came from the CIA, and they were then making money from the misery and the drug infestation that went on in South Central LA that they themselves created. How did this impact Mexico? Why do you bring that up?
Well, they are making it easy to create the cocaine. It created a market. You know, that market was first, you can see in the War of Vietnam, you have a market opening from heroin when they were involved in Vietnam. So the army and the government does initiate these things. What I bring in the heroin making and the cocaine and all these criminal things, because now Guerrero is one of the biggest growers of heroin. That's the roots of all of these things, to why we got the situation we got in Guerrero. The integration of the criminal elements and the government, it creates, instead of extreme insecurity on the populations of Guerrero, the mountain population of Guerrero, Costa Chica, and other places, to the point where the government could no longer control what they create. It was a lot of insecurity, so rondas comunitarias, guardias civiles, and all these forms,
Rondas, explain what rondas are.
It's known in Latin America, like we know the policías comunitarias. So
we also had it here, like in the Aliso area, right here in the projects, where the mothers went out and they would walk the streets at the time that the children were going out, so that they wouldn't be innocent victims of drive-bys. It's a harmony keepers that walk through the streets and make sure there's no crime going on. Then, so as things started happening, the people started mobilizing in response.
The situation of criminality and security thus brought back on Mexico, on las montañas de Guerrero, that survived the Corona, the Virreinato, the Independencia, Guerra de la Reforma, Porfiriato, and revolution. That formed from the towns, and it was recognized constitutionally as a usos y costumbres. So that form of self-security did survive.
In the traditions of the indigenous people.
The indigenous people. Yeah. It was part already of the way
they colonialism, it survived the Revolution 1810 and the reform, and it just survived. Yes. All the way to the present.
And it's most, they allow it to survive the different forms of government in order to control them a little bit more deeper, give them a certain freedom to be themselves in order to control, the territory all the way through our history. So that survived, and in 1994, they were about to come out organized as CAIN, the Coordinadora de Autoridades Indigenistas, by the indigenous towns, mainly by the Nahuatl and Mahe, and don't remember the names of the groups from Guerrero. But the uprising of the Zapatistas became harsh because the history of Guerrero itself, that it's got a very rebellious state, so it was occupied by the army. In 1995, it was a very gross crime against a girl that I think it was, I don't remember, it's 9 or 13 years old, but in an assault of a public transportation, all the members of the group sexually assaulted in front of everybody. It was a massive, rape
in front of everyone.
In front of everybody to a kid. And that angered the community to the point where they start forming, then coming out as a coordinadora de autoridades indigenistas.
Let's back up a little bit, just a tiny bit, in terms of the impact and opening that the Zapatistas created, in terms of impacting Guerrero as well.
That form was already there. And the need for them to organize and defend themselves, was there, and it's already been working out for years. The question that the Zapatistas pose, they bring about the Zapatistas, it does force the government to occupy the state because the fear of another state, where we will be another uprising due to the history of Guerrero. They came out with that form of self-security on 1995 as a CAIN, and also only oriented to the pueblos indígenas.
Okay, let's see what CAIN is again.
Coordinadora de Autoridades Indigenistas.
Coordinating Committee of Indigenous Authorities.
Yes, that was the first name of what we know today, the CRAC. For 5 years, they functioned as CAIN, and the mestizos, the pueblos mestizos, they saw the effectiveness because they were suffering the same basic integration of the government and the crimes. So they asked them to be included. In order to include the mestizos, they deliberate for several years, and 5 years after the MON formation, they changed the siglas to la Coordinadora Regional de Autoridades Comunitarias in order to include the mestizos, the pueblos mestizos.
Okay, so now you have a situation where in Guerrero, there's some of the townships are mixed, and so there's mestizos. They're not just indigenous, but the mestizos, they also took up the tradition of defense. And so in order to include that, they went from CAIN, which is Indigenous Authorities, to a coordinator of community authorities.
Yeah, autoridades, yeah.
Okay, now they're growing and they're including the mestizo or the mixed community.
The growth of them, they was admitted and also respected by the government, state government, due to the fact that they created a problem that the state government could no longer solve. Because integration of the crime, with the government elements and the criminality, they could no longer solve the problem, so they leave it to the towns to solve it. The towns, initially, what they want is just to protect the town and the immediate agricultural lands that is upon them and declare themselves neutral. No somos ni enemigos ni del narcotráfico ni del gobierno, solo somos enemigos de quien lastime nuestro pueblo. We are not enemies, not even the narcotraffics nor the governments. We are only enemies to whoever hurts our own town. So that gave them a space to where they can grow and organize themselves. That form gave them an opportunity to grow and expand a little bit. To where the point where the government allowed them because they were solving a problem that they can no longer solve because they were part of it. Okay. And at this point occupy more than half the state without major problems.
More than half of the state of Guerrero was under this type of
community policing, community security. And they were kind of left alone, financed mainly by Aguirre, with penetrate them in a few ways, but they were kind of left alone until the federal government allowed 53 permissions for mine exploration and exploitation of mines on indigenous towns.
Now, this is a very important point here, because now what we have is a struggle against the environmental exploitation by multinational companies. Mm-hmm. This one was a Canadian one, right?
It was to fight for the more natural resources, because it was not only the mines, but it's also wood, also, natural resources, lakes, waters, different things that they were under control of the indigenous towns. When the federal government allowed Canadians and British companies to explore and exploit mines on the territory of the indigenous people. They call an assembly and they reject. Out of protocols, the companies, they ask them to see if they can overfly the territory. Through assemblies, they rejected, which they didn't expect it.
You mean fly over to map?
Yeah, to map, to explore, to see where the mine...
The exploration part.
Yeah, but it was mainly a protocol. They thought that they were not have to ask. And it was only like, you're just going to do it because it's part of what we got to do, but we got it. The government gave us the permits.
I see. So it was just going through the motions. Mm-hmm. And they felt that the authority was already given to them, and it was just part of what the little steps that they had to take. Permission had already been given by the feds.
Yeah. Through assemblies, las CRACs, las autoridades comunitarias, they rejected. From then on, it started, a very severe, level of repression against them, incarceration of leaders and different things. And Olinalá, the problem was a little different than that, because Nestora Salgado built up a family on Seattle and all these things and came downtown, still believing that somehow you can work with the government.
Well, at that time, the government was lending itself.
Yes, and as soon as they formed, because crime was very severe, Aguirre was very effectively penetrating different organizations of the CRAC with programs.
What do you mean by programs?
At this point, the CRAC was divided in two groups. That was probably around 8 years ago that the UPEC, separate themselves from CRAC.
Okay, now the UPEC is...
La Unión de Pueblos de Guerrero.
Okay, so now you have a situation where the government is able to provoke a division. And so now you have CRAC on one side, which is Regional Coordinating Committee of local authorities. And now on the other side, you have the union of...
They all call themselves las comunitarias. And it's based upon assemblies and the determination of the towns to guide themselves in terms of security. And after they got the chance to organize themselves, they start taking care of the non-natural resources as town, based upon the Mexican Constitution. So they create a form and a way to organize themselves as towns, as people. And they all kind of got a certain level of freedom, but they are all under the project, el proyecto de las comunitarias.
Okay, now, since we're on this, can you explain their whole process of arrest and reforming a person and all that? Restorative justice, where a person is not jailed for life and the keys thrown away or criminalized and turned into somebody that can never contribute to the community. What was their process? Maybe you can explain.
The alternative justice system that they create was based upon redemption. Mainly. Instead of being jailed, they go to what they call a process of reeducación. Re-education, which is they going to do some service to the community. And mostly the jails are served for them to sleep. The sentence is according to the crime and also the conditions of the crime. If somebody delinquent because hunger or some other problems, or because doesn't lack any skills, then part of the sentence is to give him any skills and give him ways to he can self-survive. Learn how to make bricks, like how to, learn a skill to he can be self-sufficient. And the towns, they are rotated from town to town every 2 or 3 weeks. The local towns, they are obligated to give them 3 meals. So they work during the daytime with minimum vigilance, minimum supervision, in order to learn, do roads, learn to make bricks, different things. And after the sentence, after they compete, where the community judged to be the proper sentence for that, they are evaluated and see if they got a certain level of repentance, and then they are let free to the community with the hope that they don't, delinquent again. Okay. Major crimes, killings and all that, they are mainly given to the federal or the state government, because it's a major crime.
Major. Uh-huh.
Yes. But lately they start taking responsibility for that too. So it's a justice of trying to restructure the fabric of the community and trying to learn why somebody from the community hurt the community and why the community or what the community did in itself to create this element. So the community examine itself and also try to understand it.
Without taking responsibility from the individual, the community understands that
it's got a responsibility.
It's got a responsibility as well to change.
Yeah.
That's not the type of system we have here, right?
No.
I mean, this is. You mean they don't get put in chains and?
No. The poverty and all that, it makes it a very hard to self-sustain system. Because the communities are extreme necessity, severe poverty.
So even to feed a person, it's a struggle for the community to get it done.
And much, Aguirre start giving some money under the Constitution. They will claim that, give that money, and that kind of start tainting the project a little bit.
So it started tainting. By tainting, you mean corrupting, right?
Create dependency on this money.
Okay.
And on that dependency, they start letting go the principles a little bit. Start, somehow tainted the principles a little bit. And that then creating, a constant examine and re-examine of the communities itself. They see that they're going away from the project. They, in assemblies, they try to capture it back and then redirect it. Wow. Now, the Aguirre start giving, to La Yupe, the other one that was part of the comunitarias, is in Costa Chica and Las Montañas Bajas en Guerrero, more money than the others. So creating certain dependency and then the tendency to start imitating
favoritism.
Yes, and divide them a lot. These are very, very massive groups. There is big groups of people, with a project that is worth, be trying to understand and look, and try to even implement it on our communities.
Right on.
It's to where the communities itself, they can actually, start looking at themselves and guide themselves.
Exactly.
So it's very important project, but then again, it's been tainted now.
Nestora appears on the scene right around this time, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've brought us up to date.
Mm-hmm.
You brought us a situation where the beginnings of drugs in Mexico in the 1800s, and then in 1900s, the 1948, the disbursement of people and the creation, or the people that were addicted, coming to the state of Sinaloa, going all over the place, but the state of Sinaloa was one. And then the Contra, Reagan's way of funding the Contras against Nicaragua, created a dependency here, which was actually the market that then sparked the necessity to feed that market. There was people saw an opening to relieve themselves from poverty by filling up that market with what the market needed, which was drugs.
It comes out many different ways. You know, the economical treaties, international economic treaties, make Mexico as well as the United States to lose its own economical base by exporting jobs to where it's cheaper. Mexico open up his doors to the cheap agricultural corn and all those things and start drying up its own economy. And the agricultural economy couldn't quite survive. So in order to survive, they start going to more profitable crops, which is marijuana, which is, all these other things. The unemployment created by these economical treaties also make the narcotráfico the only sustainable and employable industry on Mexico, because they are drying everything out. They destroying our own economical base, so people got no any other way to survive but the only industry that can provide survival and work at the social cost. That is, we can see it right now. Very destructive social cost. And I think, this way to solve it, it cannot come out from the top of escalon, nor United States, nor anything. It has to come from the people itself. And one of the things that las comunitarias been saying as a logo, solo el pueblo defiende y salva al pueblo.
Only the people
itself defend itself and save
themselves.
In terms of Nestora Salgado, she came down on a point where the local politicians, they were already integrated to crime. She came down with the idea that only by doing the right things, the government can actually work for you. Aguirre gave them money, drugs, and different things. It was by the community right next to them of Nahuatl, la Coordinadora Regional de Autoridades Comunitarias, was criticized for depending on the government, and she kind of dismissed them. But she at the time didn't know that depending on the government does make you vulnerable, because the government gave them money with the intent to control them and only to let them go so far. Now she probably understands that, that that's not the route to go. It has to come from the people itself, and she's paying quite sadly a severe price.
We want to thank you, Antonio, for sharing with us all this analysis, amazing things that are not taught anywhere, nor are they written too much anywhere.
Gracias, thank you.
Next joins us Brenda Tafoya with Grisel Rodriguez and Jose Avila, husband and daughter to Nestora Salgado, leader of the Policía Comunitaria in Guerrero, who is currently imprisoned in Mexico.
This is Brenda reporting from the EastSide Community Radio. I have with me Jose Luis Avila and Grisel Rodriguez, who is husband and daughter of Nestora Salgado. Thank you so much for agreeing to take this interview.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
I want us to go back and really describe the situation of who is Nestora Salgado. Currently, right now, she is incarcerated in Mexico and maximum penitentiary. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Something that we've been trying to, kind of synthesize and kind of make clear is that my mom isn't what a lot of the media has, a lot of the media has portrayed the community police in Guerrero as like gun-toting vigilantes, and we'd like to emphasize that that isn't the case at all.
Mm-hmm.
So way before this, she's been working with the community since, I think, 2002? 2004? 2004?
Yeah.
So, it's, it's not something that happened, 3 years ago. It's been a long time in the process. And it's something that sometimes we feel gets lost as her stories are told. She's a mother, she's a wife, she's a grandmother. A lot of people don't see that sometimes. And not only that, but a lot of where it's like, auto defense, vigilante, they make it sound like what she was doing was illegal. And we also want to emphasize that it isn't. We're from the state of Guerrero.
Mm-hmm.
In Mexico, and that state counts with a specific law 701,
mm-hmm.
which permits the grouping or the formation of community police. And the reason my mom has been so involved in the community is she's originally from Olinola, the town we're from,
mm-hmm.
and she immigrated to the United States when she was 18.
Mm-hmm.
By that time, she already had 3 of us. We're 3 sisters. Like any other, immigrant who comes here. She worked. She had three jobs at a time. And when her legal status was situated, she saw kind of the difference, something that she may have not noticed because she didn't know any better, but she saw like how the community was extremely poor. It's shocking. And that's when she began her community work. She began to make various trips back and forth to Mexico, and she would take donations, she would take clothes, she would take toys. And on Christmas, she would hand out like little bags of, we call them aguinaldos, which I'm sure you know. And she would do all that because, she felt that she was in a place where she could help because she knew how it felt to be on that side of the fence, Yeah. She knew how it felt to live in that way because she is the second youngest out of 7 brothers and sisters. Her mom passed away when she was 12. So that's how she got involved in the community. And it was because of that, a lot of people, started looking up to her and started respecting her and, they would turn to her for help. That's basically how her work in the community started.
So what is la policía comunitaria?
So, like I said before, it's an actual, democratic process. It's not that, you suddenly decide, oh, I want to be coordinator, or, oh, I want to be part of the community police. What happens is there's assemblies, so the community gets together and vote. You have to be picked. You don't necessarily just say, oh, I'm part of it,
Well, the community police force, it has been working since 95. So it has been for a long time. And like Giselle said, we had the Law 701 in Guerrero, so it's a legal system. And people decide to ask Nestora, to be the coordinator because she was a well-known respect leader, from their community. Yeah. And they want something, to be, as strong as she is, willing to speak out, all the feelings, all the fears, the community has, because they have been suffering, for many, many years. I believe since 2000, they have been suffering, from kidnappings, from murders, for extortions. So people was really tired. And so they decided, to come out and fight against the organized crime because they were abandoned completely, by the federal government and the state government and the local leaders or the local politicians because they were involved in the organized crime. So when they started talking, about all this corruption between the local politicians and the cartels and the organized crime, so they start targeting Nestora, since day one. They start saying, oh, well, you need to shut up or we are going to kill you, and she decides to continue. I mean, I asked many times, hey, Nestora, you it's really dangerous, you need to come out, but she said, what, it's really hard for me to leave these people. They really believe in me, so there's no way I can walk away. She's like that. In many discussions they had with her, we really thought that she can be killed, but we never crossed in our minds that she is going to end in a prison, for a crime that she never committed, So it was really painful for us as a family, to find out the next day, then Nestora, she's in a maximum security prison, and it's not like she's in a local jail or something like that. She was 1,000 miles away in a maximum security prison, and so we were in shock. What's going on?
Take me back. So when she was appointed comandante, she did it for how long was she?
So her position was coordinator. The nickname comandante it's a nickname. It's not the same as a regular comandante. Her position was a coordinator.
She was a coordinator.
She would attend the meetings. She would fill out paperwork. She was the voice basically.
And she worked out for how long was she doing it? Because what I've gathered from the media is that she actually helped so much that crime was reduced and she was really respected.
Community police was actually in action or was active for 9 months before she was arrested.
And either you or Jose, can you guys explain, what happened when she got arrested?
Basically, what happened is community police arrested a political figure from the town, and because they were afraid, so what they asked was that this individual, be held accountable for his crimes and be removed from a public position. And the local government said, well, no, he's a political figure. He can't be punished. he's a politician, you know, and it was well known that he was this politician was the mayor's buddy. So they didn't release him, and they said, you know, this guy is to be held accountable. A couple of days later, my mom is kidnapped by the federal army. One, the army can't execute an arrest warrant, one that wasn't even provided. So she was arrested on the 21st of August. We went about 7-8 days where we didn't even know what was going on.
You guys were not informed right away?
No, we didn't know where she was. And the funny thing is, she's a U.S. citizen, and she was denied consular support, consular service, consular help, anything like of that sort. The U.S. Embassy didn't even know where she was. You know, it was my sister who contacted the embassy and notified them. You know, my mother's been arrested. My mother's a U.S. citizen. We don't know where she's at. It was after a week where they found out she was in Nayarit, a couple hundred miles away from Guerrero. It was pretty hard because her sisters, they were thinking that she had been killed and that they were asking for her body. They were like, well, we need to bury her if you just, you know, it was pretty hard.
And so, you know, she's been there since August of 2013. The legal case, what has been happening? Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Well, I want to say something, you know, all this legal process against her, you know, it has been illegal since day one because she was arrested without warrant. She was arrested without committing any crime. She's been illegally detained for 30 months already. And what it really pisses me out and really bothers me, you know, is the U.S. government, it has done almost nothing, you know, to help us. We've been knocking doors since day one, since she was arrested.
I mean, it's been 30 months.
So there's no official charge?
She's in pretrial detention. So there hasn't even been an official, she hasn't even been sentenced.
So it's 30 months and she's still in pretrial.
Yeah, and she hasn't even had the chance to defend herself from her accusers. Her accusers never go to these pretrial trials that they have where they're supposed to say, you know, oh, she's the one who, because they're accusing her of kidnapping. She hasn't had that opportunity to see who's accusing her. And it's something that's basic here. You have the right to face your accuser. Something that, like I said, 30 months. We're basically in limbo. Nothing moves forward. It doesn't move forward, but nothing moves forward. And that's how the Mexican law works. You can be held for as many years as they want.
And can I ask, has the family been able to visit her?
Yes. When she was in the maximum security prison, it was so restricted and there was so much bias against her that various family members were denied access to her. It wasn't until after she began a hunger strike. And it was thanks to, I don't know if it's well known in the media, but we also have international lawyers from the Seattle Law Clinic, Thomas Ankowiak and Alejandra Gonza. And they were working with the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights. They gave her cautionary measures. They recognized her as a human rights defender. So it was after that they accepted her as a human rights defender. They gave her cautionary measures, which are intended to protect, you know, human rights defenders, journalists. She began a hunger strike that lasted 30 days, and it was after that and much pressure from, you know, the international lawyers that she was moved from Nayarit, the maximum security prison, to another prison. I mean, it's still a federal prison, but it's down in Mexico City.
So she's in Mexico City right now?
Yeah, Tepepan. It's called Tepepan.
Yeah. You know, I think it's a bad rumor, but I wanted to have an opportunity to be addressed that, you know, there was a rumor going on saying that the hunger strike never actually happened.
The first hunger strike she did, she lasted 30 days, and it gravely affected her health. She wasn't healthy to begin with. She's always had health issues, health complications since she had a car accident in, was it 2000?
2002.
2002. She had a car accident which left her paralyzed from the neck down. So, and it was after therapy that she was able to regain some mobility, but she's always had these health issues. And after she went through with that 30-day hunger streak, her health got really, really bad. And it was after, you know, the family talked to her. We told her, you know, this battle we have, we're not battling, you know, just your average Joe. This battle is against the Mexican government. this is going to last a long time, and we need you healthy and we need you strong. So we convinced her to stop with the hunger strike.
She would have continued if you guys as a family wouldn't collectively.
I actually went to Mexico to talk to her about this because, like I said, she's always had health issues. The way her health is right now, if she even begins a hunger strike, she's not going to last the same she did last time. Mm-hmm. Because the last time she developed diabetes, and the thing that's scary to me is that she's willing to do it. You know, it's not a question of whether she wants to or she's willing to or not. She's willing to do it, but because we as her husband and as her daughters, we've asked her, okay, just please give us some time, because if she were to start that hunger strike, there's no going back.
Now, I read somewhere that your lives as family been in danger by attempting to going back to Guerrero or to trying to visit her in prison.
There's a specific situation where my oldest sister, she's living in Guerrero right now because so she can be able to visit my mom. In one of her trips to go see my mom in Nayarit, she had to take the autobus.
The bus. Like the Greyhound?
Well, yeah, exactly. So she was on the bus, and it happened that there was another woman sitting in front that, kind of looked like her, had her same features, short and in her hair in the same way. And the bus was stopped by armed men in masks. And they got on the bus and took this woman that had, this appearance like my sister, and they took off the bus and shot her in the head.
Oh, my goodness.
And she had her daughter with her. This lady had her daughter with her, which is the same age as my niece. They stopped the bus exactly for that purpose because nobody else was bothered with that.
So they didn't ask for money? They were not robbing the bus?
No. They had a purpose. Take this woman, take her onto the back of the bus, and shoot her in the head.
How are you guys handling that? It's been 30 months, and she's still in prison. I mean, is there any milestones or anything that you guys are looking forward to the future?
In October, we had a meeting with the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights and the Mexican government. And it was the first time somebody, a representative from the U.S. government, kind of went with this and sat with this in this meeting. But it is our opinion that it's time for them to take a more aggressive role in asking for freedom. I
wanted to make sure that if there's anything that you guys would like to tell the audience regarding Nestora, that you feel that I haven't touched.
I just kind of want to, when you're giving the story or you're talking about it, sometimes you tend to focus on like a lot of the negative things, mm-hmm. and you forget, the small victories. I mean, be it that they're small, but they're victories nonetheless. Mm-hmm. And she's been recognized by the federal government as a human rights defender. She was provided these cautionary measures as a human rights defender. So we're not talking on whether is she or is she not a human rights defender. So it's something I'd like to make clear. The interim governor of the state of Guerrero, that one that's before the one that's right now, Rogelio Ortega, he publicly declared her a political prisoner. She's not being held because she did something wrong. She's being held because she did something right. In a country where there's so much political corruption, that doesn't seem to sit well with them. Something else that I'd also like to mention, like I said, we had a meeting in October with the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights. We know that my mom, it's already established that her health is, she's in very bad health in the conditions she's been detained in. There was a point where they were giving her dirty tap water.
Oh, wow.
There was a point where the food they gave her had worms in it. There was even this one incident where the food that they gave her broke one of her molars because there was rocks and debris in it. And we're seeing, like, the families that have seen her, and we see her health is failing. We see her, and the Mexican government says, "Oh no, she's peachy. She's perfectly healthy." And we're sitting here like, "Well, with what eyes are you seeing her?" Because it's obvious that she isn't, and it shows how badly the government wants her in jail.
Is she, in you guys' opinion, is being made an example of?
Definitely. Not only because of the whole issue with the community places, but because, and this to me is more than obvious, because she's a woman. Most of us, we know that in Mexico, there's a lot of machismo. So for a woman to come and take a leadership role to voice out all these problems, specifically being a woman, and which is why they've been especially harsh on her as a woman, even more so than the other political prisoners, the other community police guards that were arrested. That, to me, screams that she's being made an example. Because what's more is that when she was first arrested, she was made to wear male prison uniform. Well, all the other inmates had their, the regular female prison or inmate uniforms. So basically, they're telling her, you know what, you want to take leadership, you want to role, you want to act like a man, well, then now you have to dress like a man.
I feel for the family because ultimately, like you've mentioned before, she has been put many labels, but people need to remember that it's a human that we're talking about, and a mother and a wife, and she is still there. Is there any websites that the audience that could be a part of?
There's a webpage. It's freedomstar.org.
I want to say thank you so much, Grisel. Thank you so much, Jose, for taking this time to have this conversation, and I wish the family the best.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Something that my mom actually said. I spoke to her today. She called me today, and something that she said is, she didn't want people to think of this struggle or this fight as a personal one, as it's freedom for Nestora fight, but it's actually a struggle for everybody's freedom, because she wanted people. She told me, she's like, well, I'm just asking for unity. I mean, this isn't just my struggle. This isn't just my Mexico. This isn't just my case. This is happening to everyone in Mexico. It might be affecting her personally, but I mean, that's, in a way, the small picture. But the bigger picture is that this is happening to everyone in Mexico. And it's something that, she wanted to convey, Don't see it as, a fight to get me released. See it as a fight to not let us be squashed by the Mexican government, by the corruptness and by the organized crime. You see my mom, you hear her with such strength, with such determination that you can't help, kind of absorb that strength, and you kind of keep pushing. I mean, as long as she's still, standing, we're going to keep pushing.
Where do you think she gathers her strength from?
Her love for her people, her love for her family. I mean, she would always say, I don't want my grandchildren to be scared to go back to their, the place where their parents are from. The day I leave this world, I want it to be, somewhat of a safer place for my children, for my family.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Jose, Grisel, thank you so much for taking the time. I think the message that Nestora is putting out there, it's a great one. Someone who's been a human activist, someone who's has given back to her community. I hope that people who are listening gotten a little bit educated regarding the situation. We can't ignore what the bigger picture is of what kind of government is that allows for situations like this to happen.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Eastside Community Radio. Special thanks to the Eastside Cafe, Pila Castello, Elefante, Michael Becerra, Antonio Arias, Jose Avila, Grisel Rodriguez, Miriam Padilla, Quetzal, and all the volunteers at the Eastside Community Radio that make these episodes possible. The song Torro Ayotzinapa was written and performed by Quetzal. For more information and program submissions, you can contact us by email at esccommunityradio@gmail.com and like us on Facebook. All our episodes are archived and available for streaming on SoundCloud. Thank you for listening.
Estudiantes de noche se lo llevaron genocidio de Estado y de lesa humanidad, y de lesa humanidad. Ay, no más, no más, ay, no más, no más. A mí no me queda duda, es terrorismo del Estado. 3 niveles de gobierno se estaban involucrados, los narcos militares y el crimen organizado. Masacre de Ayotzinapa, no eres un caso aislado. En Acapulco obreros cayeron asesinados, cayeron asesinados. Y no más, no más, ay, no más, no más. Nos han cerrado la lucha pacífico electoral, solo nos queda un camino